And with me today, presenting this information for you, is Miss Deborah Van Dyken and Miss Carol Stone, who you already know, I believe, as a member of the church, and probably knows way more than I do about this whole getting older thing, since that's her profession. Miss Van Dyken, I think most of you are familiar with her as well. She is an attorney, and she has done, her practice was here in Beaufort, and she does numerous things, but lately elder law, which is why she was invited to participate. The clerk, as you may know, is not allowed to practice law. We can tell you if we got a form for that, and we can tell you what we need, but we're not allowed to practice law. And the reason I'm here today is because over the last several years as your clerk, I have seen things come through my office that made my heart hurt. For example, there was a lady that I got a phone call one day, and it was a friend of mine, and she said, I have a very good friend who left her home and moved in with her daughter because the daughter lost her job, and she moved in to help her daughter because she loves her daughter, and they got into an argument and the daughter pushed her down the stairs. Not good. And I said, oh dear Lord. I said, she said, I think they arrested her. I said, good. And if that is indeed what happened, the place you need to start is the Department of Social Services, because they would have taken an elder abuse file, started a file for her to try and get her some help. Okay? So that is exactly what had happened. I said, call them and tell them exactly what you told me, give them her name, and she said, I just want to know if she's okay. So that's what happened, and she did find her. There's another case, and this, I mean, you all know Carteret County has become a retirement community, right? We're all getting older. We can't stop it, and we really don't want to. It's better to be older than not, right? Gentleman from out of county and his wife retired on the western end of the county. Very well-off couple. One of those nice big beach homes and everything, and they're living the life. Sailboat, fishing, walking on the beach. She dies. He kind of flounders a little bit. The neighbor across the street said, what can I do to help you? He said, well, you know, she used to pay all my bills. And she took care of that. The neighbor said, well, I'll take care of that for you. Well, by the time the man's two sons found out how that neighbor was helping and taking care of that for him, he was almost destitute. Okay? And then, you know, as he had slipped into a little bit of dementia as well. So I'm sitting there looking at this file going, because he had basically given her his credit card. And the sons thought that everything was fine because they didn't know. You know, they came down once in a while and Dad maintained, you know, a decent conversation with them. They didn't know he had been drifting. When I looked at that credit card report for that person that had been taking care of this for the gentleman, and I saw veterinarian bills, the man didn't have a dog. I saw lots of coffee shop and boutique expenses. I saw plastic surgery. Yeah. And so, of course, I processed that on, and they came to a resolution with that one as well. But those are the kind of things that can happen if we don't have our children here, or somebody that we trust to take care of those issues for us. And I like to say that we plan our whole lives for that retirement, but then we forget to plan that last phase of our life. And it's most important for you to plan this phase of your life, because if you don't, that choice will be somebody else's. And it might wind up being mine, and I definitely don't want it being mine. I want it to be what you want. I want you to make those decisions. And there are some things that you can do and some tools that you can put into place now while you're still healthy and mentally healthy that can take care of that for you. For the first time in United States history and counting, there are 51,104,848 65-plus years in this country. In the state of North Carolina, in 2014-15, there were more than 24,500 reports of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And now I'm including those exploitation things, and you all are familiar with the ones about the telephone scammers and the people that come and they want to fix your roof after a storm or something like that. You all are aware of those ones. But there are many, many more out there that the Attorney General never even gets involved with. And to put it into perspective for you, those 24,500 cases, those reports, those are only reports that were accepted by the Department of Social Services that they took action in, okay? Experts believe that for every case that gets reported, 23 cases go unreported. So multiply that 24,500 by 23, and that's 563,500 estimated cases in the state of North Carolina in 2014-15. That's pretty staggering if you think about it. And let me give you something to compare it to. The National Vital Statistics System, the CDC, said opioid-involved deaths in 2015, opioid deaths. Now, y'all have heard that opioid drum being banged, right? What a problem it is, what a problem it is. And I'm not saying it's not, okay? Drugs have always been a problem, and people that abuse them, they have always been a problem. Ever since I was growing up, I can name the drug by the decade of my life, just about. CDC said opioid-involved deaths in 2015 were 33,091. That's nationally. 33,091 nationally, okay? For North Carolina in 2014-15, cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation that may or may not have been reported, 563,500. What does that tell you? There's a lot of us baby boomers, aren't there? And Carteret County has about 1/3 of our population in the county now is 60+ years old. And I got that information from across the street. That way. That street. We're bearing there. So, the number of incompetencies in my office have been going up every year. And that is something that none of us are going to be able to control. It happens. I don't want you to be afraid of it. What I want you to do is plan for it and be ready for it. They are calling financial abuse the crime of the 21st century because of the magnitude of it and how easy it is to exploit somebody. I talked to a gentleman this morning that I grew up with in Newport, and he said that, you know, my family has been real close with his. He just lost his wife, and my brother is a kind of a computer expert. Somebody called him on the phone and told him his computer was going to crash, and he needed to give them their email address so that they could stop his computer from crashing. They told him they were from Microsoft or something like that. And he gave it to him because he didn't know that much about computers. This is an 80-year-old man. But he's on that computer emailing and doing stuff like my mama does. And the next thing he knew, he'd been hacked. Fortunately, my brother knows computers, and he's close to this gentleman, and he went over and he found everything, and now, unfortunately, he's going to have to contact his credit card companies because they accessed all of his information. Okay? That's not going to get reported to the police department, but it's a crime. He's been exploited. what is neglect and abuse? By law, the definition. Abuse is the willful infliction of physical pain, injury, or mental anguish. Unreasonable confinement or the willful deprivation by a caretaker of services necessary to maintain mental and physical health. Neglect. Disabled adult who is either living alone or not able to provide for himself the services necessary to maintain mental or physical health, or not receiving services from their caretaker. And exploitation, I think we pretty much all had that one down, right? Illegal or improper use of a disabled adult or his resources for another's profit or advantage. The UNC School of Government says $2.9 billion annually is heisted from elder adults. Financial exploitation, $2.9 billion a year. That's a lot of money. So what we want to do is encourage you to think about how you can protect yourself and others that you may know. I think I told you that the cases from Adult Protective Services at the Department of Social Services in 15-16, there were 185 accepted cases here at the local Department of Social Services. 16-17, 226 cases. So you can see the trend is going up. And remember to multiply that by the 23 that we don't know about. What I'd like to do now that I've read you the definitions is to let Ms. Van Dyken go over some of the legalities of things that you can do to put in place to protect yourself, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Deborah Van Dyken. And so some of the things that you can do to protect yourself, and many of you may have already done this, but it's to have one thing is to do is to have a living will. And what a living will does, and there's a handout, I don't know if you all have got one, it talks about, it helps your family and your doctors know what do you want. And in the living will, which is a legal document, it's notarized with 2 witnesses, you say what you want to have happen if you become terminal and incurable, or if you have dementia, or if you're in a comatose state. So you can select kind of under which circumstances you want things to kick in. And you can request that you not have any extraordinary means. And that's like ventilation, resuscitation, antibiotics. And you can also say that you don't want any artificial nutrition or hydration. Now that's the kicker, because you could go, as we saw with Karen Ann Quinlan, if you all remember her, she was in a coma for many years, and she was unconscious, but she had artificial nutrition and hydration, so she was able to live. But if you withdraw artificial, feeding tubes, IVs, in about a week, you will die. So you can make that request if so that you don't end up like Karen Ann Quinlan.
10 years later.
Yeah, terrible. So this is an important document, and you want to make sure that you get a copy to your doctor. You want to give it to your family members so that they know what your wishes are. A lot of families have a lot of arguments about, well, we don't want to pull the plug on Mama. Yeah, Mama wouldn't want to live like that. Yes, she would. No, she wouldn't. You can have huge family fights about what are you going to do about pulling the plug on Mama. This document, if everybody, and then they go to court. I mean, I've had that. We have to have a court order. What's happening to Mama? So what you have to do is get it done, give it to your healthcare power of attorney, your doctors, your family members, so that everybody knows what it is you want, and then keep the original in a good place. Do you have any questions about living wills right now? Yeah.
Can you put in there to not withhold the ice?
Sure, why not?
I
There's,
mean, no,
Barbara?
take the food away from him, but not the ice.
yeah, you can say,
We all understand.
and they're not going to withhold pain medication or anything to alleviate pain. That won't happen. It's just the IVs, the feeding tubes, that kind of thing.
Breathing
We'll
machines.
see you get a cube
Yeah.
of ice.
Any other questions? Yes.
Would that be if you couldn't respond directly?
Yes, I mean, that's if you're unconscious. I mean, if you're able to speak, you can tell people what you want.
Right.
But if you're in a terrible car accident, or if you have a stroke, so you're basically unconscious or unable to communicate, you've got severe dementia, that's where the living will, which you have to be pretty much with it, when you do it.
But I mean, you can put that in the living will.
Sure, why not?
It's your document.
It's you can say, I want ice. Why not? Any other questions?
How often should this be reviewed? I presume the laws change over the years?
Living
'Cause I have
will,
one that's like 15 years old.
I couldn't tell you if it's good. I mean, it probably is. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff. We've been doing this a long time, so if they talk about artificial, nutrition, hydration, resuscitation, ventilation, antibiotics, all of that, it probably works. And if you talk about severe dementia, persistent vegetative state, terminally ill, I mean,
So if I wake up from my coma and say, hey, I want a transfusion, they'll give it to me.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, and then there's another, if you're conscious and you're pretty much with it,
Yeah,
if
today's Thursday, I want my transfusion.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
get to take your control back.
Yeah.
It comes back to you.
Yeah.
It's only when you can't communicate what you want.
Okay, how about if I move out to Greensboro or Asheville, does it still work?
still works, it works interstate also.
In Ohio?
Yeah,
Just make sure somebody knows that it exists.
right, which is why you want your family members and your healthcare power of attorney and your doctor. Your general practitioner should have a copy of this in your file. Yeah.
Deborah, Pat Wesson, sometime back, had something for us. And she was encouraging everybody that had living wills and stuff, and what he wanted done, to be programmed into the VIDAN program. I don't know what hospitals will want you to do that. But I've been processing that, but I know a lot too, like in mine, that, and children or family know you, that, just like how old you are, what your condition is.
Right.
And you've been given X amount of time to pull out of what you've got.
Right, that's a good
That
thought.
plays a lot into that.
If you're going to go to Carteret General, or you go to Greenville, or you go to Newbury, you can bring a copy or mail them a copy, fax them a copy, so it gets put in your file at that hospital. That's a good idea too.
Yeah, I scared my children a few years back. I got all the paperwork done, and I forgot to give it to them.
Oh.
So about 2 years went by, and so one Christmas or some holiday or something, I gave it to them. And both my daughters got real white. They said, "Mother, you trying to tell me something?"
Yeah.
I said, "No." I said, "In a way, but I'm letting you know I've got a head of it." And they appreciated that. They realized that.
Absolutely.
And you want to do this when you've got all your marbles, basically, because once you basically lose it, you can't do this. Another really important document to do is your healthcare power of attorney. This is really important because it authorizes the person you name to get your medical information so that the doctors or your healthcare providers can give you give that person the test results so you can talk about it. In addition, if you are unable to make decisions for yourself, you're in a car wreck, a stroke, or dementia, that person is authorized, or you have authorized that person to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. And so they can withhold, they can say have surgery, not have surgery, be hospitalized, be put in a nursing home, or not. They can make decisions about what kind of treatment, drugs, you're going to have. Now, the one thing that they are not allowed to do is you are always allowed to have pain alleviation medication. They can't say, no, she was mean to me, don't give her, Oxycontin, No, that, you're always allowed to have that. And you can revoke this at any time. So if you nominate your daughter, for example, and then you realize maybe your daughter is not that great of a choice and maybe your son should do it, you can revoke it and do a new one. So you can change it. It's not engraved in stone. Again, it's a legal document, so it has to be notarized, and you have to have 2 witnesses who cannot be related to you by blood or marriage, or cannot be healthcare employees of healthcare providers or the nursing home or facility where you may be staying. It's a really great document. When my mother at age 90 fell and broke her hip, I flew up there, and I could talk with the doctors. Now my mother was like sharp as a tack, but she wanted to talk with me about it. And so I talked with the doctors and made a decision about what was going to happen with my mother telling me what I'm going to do. And so it's an important document. If you don't have it, what happens is then this is where the clerk of court comes into play, because if you can't make your healthcare decisions because you're comatose, then they have to file a petition to have you declared incompetent. And it's expensive, it's time consuming, and if you have dementia where you kind of fade in and out, sometimes you're fine, sometimes you're not fine, it's very crushing to the person to be told that they're incompetent. I mean, it's really, and it's your family doing it to you, there's a lot of hard feelings can result with that.
Insult to injury.
Yeah. So a healthcare power of attorney is important because you can name your primary healthcare agent and you can name a backup. So if the primary one dies, is incapacitated, then your backup can just slide in and take over. I don't know if you have any questions about healthcare power of attorney.
Does everyone have one?
That's good.
They're
This is
also
good.
called advanced directives.
They're called advanced directives too.
Good.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I've been part of the End of Life Coalition here in Carteret County for 2 years, so I'm very familiar with this.
Yeah.
And I've helped quite a few residents at Ecclesia do these. And I've had Chaplain Wiley come over this a couple months ago
Yeah.
to help with it. So
Brilliant.
The one thing I will say is when you name this person, you are entrusting your life to them. So you have to be really careful and make sure that this is a reliable person, particularly if that person is going to inherit everything you own. I'm serious,
There's
Reptile.
nothing like a will or the possibility of money that changes people.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that. There are so many arguments in so many families, and there shouldn't be.
What about if you already have one?
You're fine
Your
then.
children, you stipulated that.
Yeah. One last thing, there's power of attorney. Now, the power of attorney has changed, the statute has changed as of January 1st, 2018. Your old power of attorney is still good if it was valid when it was done, if it was done properly, but you cannot use the old forms after January 1st, 2018 because they may not be valid. We haven't had a judge tell us what the answer is going to be on that. There's a new statute, new forms, new everything. But a power of attorney authorizes someone to act on your behalf. And you can have a power of attorney that takes place right away and then also continues if you become incompetent. You could have a power of attorney that comes into play only when you become incapacitated or incompetent. You can have a power of attorney that's only for a specific period of time. For example, you're going out of the country or you're being deployed, so it's a definite start and end. And you can have a power of attorney for a specific type of thing, an event, like buying a house or buying a car. So there's a number of things and ways you can structure it. You can also pick out what you want them to be able to do. And you've got the general authorities, which are defined by statute, like real estate, taxes, insurance. There's a whole list, and I've got them out there. And those are, you can pick and choose. You don't have to give that person everything. The other thing that you really want to be careful are the special authorities called, the nickname for them is hot powers. Those to me are really dangerous to assign to a person. if you give someone hot powers, special authority, they can make gifts, including to themselves, to the new girlfriend, to, they can clean you out, basically. And they can change the wills, they can change revocable and irrevocable trusts, so it's my recommendation, you never give somebody specific authority called the hot powers unless there's a really, really, really good reason for it.
Are you saying HOT?
HOT, hot powers.
But it would be a hot mess if you gave them
It
that
will,
much authority.
it can be a real hot mess. The new powers of attorney, they have to be notarized. You don't have to record them if it does not involve real estate. But I think the best practice is always record your power of attorney because you don't know if real estate might be involved in the future. So you want to record the power of attorney at the Register of Deeds. That's very important.
And the first thing that they do if something happens like Alzheimer's, somebody will go looking to see if there is a power of attorney on
Right.
file at the Register of Deeds
Right.
for you, and who has that power of attorney to take care of you.
Right. So it's very, very important to record that.
So if I go to another county, I need to register that in the other county, is what you're saying, as well as this.
Well, if you live here, is it statewide when you look?
They should.
It wouldn't hurt to record. If you move to another county, say in the Piedmont or the mountains, it wouldn't hurt to record it again.
Yeah.
In the county in which you live. I get calls all the time from people saying, well, Mama had a will, but we can't find the original. Or, Mama had power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney, we can't find the original. And so if you record the power of attorney, it's public record, and it's there. And you just have to be careful, again, who do you give this power to? You have to trust them with all your money and your bills and everything else. And and you also can make a backup power of attorney, agent, they're called agents. And that way if the first agent, for whatever reason, dies, can't do it, doesn't want to do it, then the other one slides in. If you don't have a power of attorney and you become incompetent for dementia, a car accident, or an illness, then here we go, back to court with Pam, and you have to file a petition to declare that person incompetent, and they have to appoint a guardian. So that's expensive, time-consuming, and
And you don't want to do that to yourselves or your family members.
no. So I don't know if you have any questions about that.
I do have a question. Are there laws put in place to protect a person that has done the power of attorney to keep somebody from taking advantage of them? You know
Not
what I'm
really.
asking?
Well, here's your power of attorney, your agent, has to use their best efforts, and they cannot do fraudulent activity and willfully do you wrong, okay? So if they, like this example here, start writing, checks, you name your son as agent, and he goes out and pays off his mortgage and takes a vacation with your money and does all that, then that's fraud. Then he can't get away with that.
Because see, I've also understood it too, and maybe I've been this, because I've been to a lot of training, that in order for a power of attorney to really be enacted, a doctor has to enact it and say this person can no longer take care of their...
It depends on how you structure it, okay? If the power of attorney takes effect when you become incapacitated, then you do have to have a doctor state in writing that you're incapacitated.
Okay,
But if it's a durable power of attorney that takes effect the day that you sign it,
okay,
then and then part of doing this durable power of attorney, you will depend. You can add or not add that stays in effect if you become incapacitated. And it really depends on the circumstances, which is why this is such an important document. Hauling one off the internet, you could really hurt yourself. You could give these hot powers, these special powers, without realizing that's what you're doing. Which is why I don't have the forms out here, because I think it's a mistake just to hand them out like candy, because if you pick the wrong person and sign the wrong thing, you could lose everything. So,
I've just tried to, throughout my career as a social worker, try to understand that law, because I've worked in a psychiatric unit
Yeah.
and worked in a hospital, and I'm working with seniors now, and I hear it so many different ways, the protection of the BOA.
Right.
How do you protect somebody that has assigned somebody a BOA from taking advantage of them? And it's just.
They're just supposed to use their best efforts and to not do fraudulent things, you know.
Okay.
But,
And there's two major general statutes that kind of control, do you want to talk about those, Deborah?
which was,
Chapter 14.
I actually had one resident that had a POA, and she would come in my office and go, I don't want you to do anything she tells you to, you need to listen to me.
well, and it depends on the kind of power of attorney you've done. If it's a durable power of attorney that takes effect when you sign it, it's in effect.
Yeah.
And that person can go and do, they can help pay your bills, I mean, assuming they do something good, but they can also do some things that you might not like,
Like get plastic surgery.
like in plastic surgery. But see, that would be fraudulent.
Yeah.
You know, that would clearly be fraudulent. And they can't do that. Then they would be looking at criminal charges.
Deborah?
Yeah,
I'm retired from the civil service, and my wife is retired from federal civil service also. And we had powers of attorney created here in Carteret County. And she became severely sick with dementia. And I wanted to get her federal civil service pension because we needed to pay bills. I was dealing with a federal agency called Office of Personal Management, and I sent them the local power of attorney, and they said, we won't accept this. Why not? We need a federal power of attorney. Apparently my legal counsel never heard of federal power of attorney.
I've not heard of it either. I've never run into it.
And I was also in the military. I was retired, and I retired from the military like 14 years ago. But what I discovered is that the Department of the Air Force would accept state power of attorney. The Department of the Army would not. Again, it comes back, we need federal power of attorney. People don't understand this, because it took me over 2 years to get my wife's pension for her.
Wow,
It was back and forth for 2 years, and it was like pulling teeth, you know?
wow.
But I went on the internet, and I found the federal power of attorney, and it's just one side of one sheet of paper, a couple sentences, but that's all they want. But then my attorney said, well, I cannot use a power of attorney to create a second power of attorney. This won't work.
No, because she would have to be competent.
Well, at that time, she wasn't.
See, then you've got a problem.
I had a problem.
Well, that's
So
sort of-
when, if you're going to create a power of attorney, and in the past, you worked in the federal civil service or in the Department of the Army or something, you better get a federal power of attorney done at the same time. It's a very simple thing, and will save you a lot of grief.
Yes.
Ask the question, I worked many years at a bank, if a couple being married, they joint account, and like both of their retirement went into that account, would that mean that either one of them could spend the money?
Yeah.
They got the one.
You
So
bet.
that would be kind of a way around that. If you can do it. That if all your monetary stuff like that, that liquid, that you can use it,
Right.
you know, were tied together.
And that's a real good way to do that. Have, joint accounts or beneficiary, everything to that loved one or the children or whoever you're going to beneficiary it to. Then it goes outside of the estate process.
Right.
And you don't have to run it through the estate process and count it. It goes directly to those designated people. We're talking CDs, we're talking IRAs, we're talking bank accounts, we're talking, properties, whatever you've got, vehicles. A lot of times people come in and the only thing they've got to deal with is a vehicle that they forgot was only in the husband's name, So if you've got them in both names and they're joint, then it makes it a lot easier because it goes around that estate and you wind up with it.
You want to make sure you have, with a lot of these bank accounts, you have with right of survivorship. So it's not an account, say there's 100,000, it's not an account where two names, one would get half and the other would get the other half. With right of survivorship, if, say, the husband died, it would all go to the wife. And so then it would become hers, and it's not part of the estate, and you don't have to pay taxes and all of that.
All that stuff.
And then you've got access to that money, too.
Yes,
Yeah,
to take care of the bills.
And you can put, like with my mom, I was on her checking account, so that when she died, I could pay her bills, you know, all the expenses with that checking account. I didn't have to wait until we, you know, probated, which we did later on for the other stuff, but I had access to this money to pay the immediate funeral and outstanding
Light bill,
bills.
water bill,
Yeah,
whatever
all that
came
kind
up.
of thing.
All those things that
Of
catch
course, the
people
only
off guard.
backside of that is two married couple are tied together, one can dump the account on the other.
There is
Something
that.
to think about.
There
They
is
can
that.
take
One
money.
person could go.
Take money.
Oh, yeah,
That
they can-
happened, like
well-
they have an argument and the other one goes to get some money and they found out.
Well, sure, that happens.
That morning that, you know, everything's gone and they. get
Well,
hold of it.
I'm a family law attorney, so I've seen a lot of that, you know, and what then happens if you split up, then, and not to get into family law, but you don't get away with it because then that's part of your share of equitable distribution. So you may think you're grabbing all this money, but it just actually goes onto your side of the pie. And so you don't get away with it.
What was that issue that you addressed with date change? Something changed
Oh,
to
January
Would you
1st.
run that by again?
Okay, so as of January 1st, 2018, North Carolina has enacted the new statutes on the power of attorney, okay? Now, your old powers of attorney that were done prior, if they were done correctly prior to January 1st, 2018, are still good.
Done by an attorney?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
still fine. But the concern, which are malpractice carriers and the Bar Association and the State Bar have been banging this drum loudly, is after January 1st, there's new forms, a new statute, and what they don't want attorneys to do is use the old forms because they reference, you're using a statute that's no longer valid, and you're using forms that are no longer valid. So the question that we don't know the answer to, does that mean that power of attorney is invalid? These are ones done after January 1st, 2018. That would be malpractice on an attorney's part to do that.
So if you've got one in place now,
You're fine.
it should be okay.
Thank you
If
for
you
answering
don't
the
have
question.
one and you're going to leave here and go make one, make sure it's the new paperwork that
Right,
you utilize.
the new statute, not the old one, because there's probably some attorneys out there who are not paying attention. And that's the only thing.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions about power of attorney or?
Oh, I want to mention one thing about wills. If you have a will, this is very important. The estates office at the courthouse has a program called safekeeping. And they will take your original will and put it in the vault. You just put it in an envelope, seal it so nobody knows what's in the will, and you sign your name on it. And they keep it in the vault. So it's free, it doesn't cost anything. And that way, the only person who can get that original will, which is what you need to bring to the estates office, or your executor does, is you. During your life, you're the only person who can get that will. At your death, the only person who can get that will from safekeeping is your executor. So that avoids wills being changed, wills disappearing, wills getting lost or burned up in a flood or a fire. And I think it's a really good program. And you get a little certificate, which when I do wills, I recommend it highly. I bring the will to the estates office, I get a little safekeeping certificate, I make copies of it and give the original certificate to my client. And I make little packets for the executor, the backup executor, and a family member. So everybody knows where the original will is. Because we get calls, well, Mama made a will, but we can't find the original. You know, that's a big problem.
And that goes to the courthouse, you said?
The estates office.
estates
Estates office.
Yeah.
So if you have an attorney draw this up and you feel like that he was supposed to take it to the courthouse?
No, he's not supposed to do anything.
So you wouldn't even physically do that?
Well, I, as the attorney, will do it for my client, but I'm not required to do that. I just mention it to my clients because I think it's a really good service and it's free. You know, it helps the family, it helps my client. You don't have to worry about a fire or a flood or someone coming.
Well, the one thing I will add there,
Yeah.
nothing is fireproof.
Well, true.
Nothing is fireproof,
Right.
and we know because we live on the water, nothing is waterproof, okay? We will maintain it and we will keep it, and nobody will have access to it except your executor. But I won't promise if that courthouse burns down, they're all going to be there. I can't
Well,
promise that.
hopefully that will not, they're in the vault, it's in the vault.
Yeah, hopefully it won't happen.
And if it floods and it's pretty high up,
It sounds like you have.
If it does, we're all in a world of panic.
we're all up there, hey, you know,
But if it gets that high.
it'll be over my house.
Having the second copy we say.
Well, you'll have copies, I
Absolutely.
mean, you have copies
But I mean,
spread
that
out.
would be a very safe.
Yeah,
Yes.
Do you offer or do you keep the original will when you prepare one for a client?
no, never, no.
Okay.
I keep a copy, I give the original back to my client, I tell them about the safekeeping offered by the estate's office. If they say yes, then I take the original, go to the estate's office, leave it there, get the certificate, and I put a package together for my client. So I've got the original power of attorney and what other original documents, copies of the will, and then I have copies for their executor, their backup executor, and if I'm doing powers of attorney, I have copies. I mean, we kill trees, okay, so I want everybody to know.
Many trees.
Right, make the paper.
Now, do you know any attorney who does that?
Keeps the will?
Keeps the original of the will?
I don't know.
Okay, just asking.
Well, now with computers, they might keep it alive, but it's the only way you know that they get rid of it.
You're not,
I mean,
no, you
I'm
cannot get rid of it. You cannot get rid of an
Okay.
original will. I mean, we have to keep our clients' records for 6 years, and then the shredder truck comes every year, and I get, you know, I just did 2011. But the rules, the State Bar rules say if you have the original will, you cannot shred it. You get to keep that and drag that around with you the rest of your life. So I'm serious. And I don't want that responsibility. I think that the original will should either go with my client. If they don't want to put it in safekeeping, fine, here it is, you know, but it's their responsibility.
And I think I heard somebody mention the other really good place besides the clerk's office to keep a will. And keep in mind that circumstances change, right? You may downsize in a house and you may have that will stuck in a book, a Bible, and you know, that book gets put into a box and you move or something. Your safe deposit box at the bank. If you have a checking account somewhere at a bank, those I would guarantee are fireproof and probably flood-proof. And the only one that's going to get into that safety deposit box will be the person that's on that card at the bank. And if you have an executor for your will, you could put that person on that card. Because here's what happens. If you pass and your name is the only one on that card, your executor can't even get in that box. And so they call the clerk. And they have to open the box in the presence of the clerk. And what I'm specifically looking for is that will. And so that's another really good place for you to protect that will.
Any more questions?
Where is your original?
My son-in-law has it. He's nice.
Moving along so we don't keep you guys tied up all day. Carol is going to speak for a little bit now.
And most of you know me as Carol Stone, who was the administrator at Family Caregivers. But before I moved here to retire, I was a special ed teacher, and I was an advocate for kids. And I was also a mandated reporter. So I'll tell you how I got into Family Caregivers. Like I said, I moved here to retire, and not long after that, I got a call from my sister, and she said, "You got to come. He's not telling us the truth." I said, "Okay, what's not the truth?" She said, "He's begun hoarding. He started hoarding. The house is not in great shape, and you need to come." And I said, "I'll be there." So my husband and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina, met my sister and brother-in-law, and we cleaned out the house, which he was absolutely starting to hoard. That's one of the first signs that things are going awry. Just newspapers, just clutter everywhere. So we did that. We met his caregiver. And we left and we thought, well, everything's looking pretty good here. You know, it's going to be okay. She seems really nice. And he liked her. Well, it wasn't long after that, and I got a call saying that my dad was in the hospital and I needed to go. So again, I met my sister. We went to the hospital. We checked on my dad, and he told me at that time, I've got the lawyer coming. I need you to be my power of attorney. I'm going to have that taken care of. The lawyer came to the hospital. We had all of that taken care of. His reasoning for doing that at that time was he needed me to, he was going to be in the hospital for a while. He needed me to move some funds around for him. I was obviously the person that he decided was the best to do that. So I agreed and got back and moved all those funds around for him and paid his bills electronically the way he had them set up and took care of that for him. Well, I was able to get into his bank account and I started noticing all these charges. And I thought, he wouldn't buy these things. He's not going to McDonald's and he's not shopping at Walmart and he's not doing all of these things. And I called my sister and I said, we've got a problem. I said, I'm going to turn on your fax machine. I'm getting ready to fax you this bank statement that I'm looking at. His caregiver's still on. So we had to confront him with that, and he did not want to own that. He just didn't want to believe that she would do that to him because he put all of his faith and stock in her. I told my sister, I said, let's watch this for a while. You know, I was a special ed teacher, so I was one who wanted to look for the soft signs. Well, what she was actually doing is sometimes she wasn't even there when she said she was, and she was calling us and reporting to us her hours so we could make sure that he could figure out her pay. Well, that was deceitful. So long story short, I went back down to Charleston, South Carolina, met my sister again, and I said, we're going to have to get an agency. We really didn't know much about agencies. We were just starting to hear a little bit about agencies, so we did that. We said somebody has to be responsible and accountable. I was 6 hours away in Beaufort. I couldn't just run down the road every time there was an incident. He didn't want us to fire her. He wanted to handle it himself. Well, I know now why he didn't want us to do it. He feared retribution. He feared she might come back and cause a problem of sorts. I learned after the fact that he had, well, he said loan, but you know, it ended up being a gift. He had given her $1,000, and she said she needed it for a root canal. Well, perhaps not. I'll never know. He had loaned her money that she said she needed for her daughter's college education. Well, of course, he never saw that again. And that was that. So we got an agency, and we had good luck and good success. And I always believe you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So I was very kind to the people that ran the agency. I wanted him to have the best care. And he lived out his life with someone from an agency caring for him, and I had peace of mind.
And agencies provide agents who are bonded, or you are?
We are a bonded agency.
So
we are bonded.
That is
yes.
going to make sure
the
things
person that
work out.
I knew the person that came to take care of my father was coming from a bonded agency. There was a background check and a drug test done. And even though this is South Carolina, who has no rules, I did find someone who was licensed and bonded. I was able to find someone.
But the prior caregiver, I'm hurt
She
here.
was she was a private somebody. I don't even know where he
But she was not bonded.
No.
She was just a caregiver.
She was just a caregiver. And I'm not saying that all caregivers that aren't with an agency are deceitful. I'm not saying that at all. She was.
You just need to pick
She
wisely.
was. So we had to do
wisely.
something different because we didn't live in the same town. My sister lived in Columbia, South Carolina. She was closer. And I was 6 hours away. And I have to tell you something funny about my dad. I said, why did you pick me to be your power of attorney? Durable and medical. He said, well, you've never asked me to loan you any money. I said, look at your children. Maybe that's something you should consider. I don't know. I had 3 siblings. But I thought that was pretty, I like that. I did like that. And I did honor all of his wishes. I did everything by the book and the way he wanted me to do it. However, when he didn't want to comply, I would say, well, you know, if you don't want to do this or you don't do that, I can always put you in a home. You won't be able to stay at home and do what you want to do, but you must follow the rules. You have to do these certain things. And then he would think, well, that means DSS, and I just probably don't want to go through that route. So yeah, I'll listen to you and I'll do what you want me to do. But long story short, so many things about that did not sit well with me. And like I said, I was a big advocate for kids, worked in schools for all those years, and mandated reporter. And I just thought these things shouldn't be happening to people. So we decided, we did a lot of due diligence. Pat Wesson was one of she was one of the first. The first two with Friendly Caregivers were Pat Wesson and Anna Stanley, who I just, think the world of Anna Stanley. But anyway, I came in and joined those two. And since that time, we've grown and we've learned, oh my goodness, you can't tell me a story that I won't recognize, because we've seen it, we've heard it all. I love what these ladies have said, be your own advocate while you can. While you can. But the first thing we ask when somebody calls our agency, we'll say, well, do you have a power of attorney? Or who's the power of attorney for your family? Because we really would like to speak with that person. And we always ask for that paperwork if it's available. Some people haven't taken care of that yet. Doesn't mean we're going to turn them down and not provide service. But we like to encourage people to take care of those things. Have I had to report? Only twice. And I did it because it needed to be done. It was a process, and luckily I have great nurses that they're mandated reporters too. So we get together, we have a great team of people. Rarely in our business does one person make the decision. We sit down, everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got a value, so I want to hear what you have to say. At the end of the day, yeah, I'm a responsible person, but that doesn't mean that I always go with my idea. Sometimes somebody has one that's better than mine, but just know that we are a good team. We're an advocate for you. If you choose an agency, we're an advocate for you and your well-being. We want you to stay at home as long as you can with good care. Everybody that comes to us to work has to pass a background check, have to go through numerous interviews. Sometimes first impression is everything. Sometimes that we just, no, that's not going to work for us. You're drug tested. You have to go through a training program. That's part of our hiring process. How many of you know Polly Dixon, Bill Mitt's wife? Polly's awesome. She's one of our nurses. Before Polly was a nurse, she was a teacher. So she does a really good job of training. Sometimes people start that training program and they go, this isn't exactly what we wanted or we thought it was going to be. So they eliminate themselves before we have to. Most people that want to be in our industry do because they love to help other people. Coming from where I come from, documentation is absolutely essential. If it's not documented, it never happened. So I start looking at patterns of behaviors, whether it's with the client or the caregiver, and I pick up on those things. Most of the time, any issues with the client can be handled with the family. It doesn't need to go as far as DSS. We can usually stop this. People get accused or people think that abuse is occurring when families don't really understand that they need to step in and they need to take care of something. So you do need to tell your family the truth because they don't know maybe that something else is going on with you. The elderly most often want to keep their, they don't want to give up their control of things. You're shaking your heads because you know I'm talking to you. Control is really hard to give up. It is for me. I don't want to give up my control. It's part of your dignity. We want to keep that intact. Independence. Yes, very much so. And I think that people thrive at home. I think more people do better when they're in their own surroundings. But we all have to face the fact that we're going to need some help one day. So set up whatever you need to set up. If you want to start with an agency one day a week, do it. Then you're in the routine, you're in the habit, you can always build upon your time. So do you have any questions for me?
Help me.
I'm absolutely here to do that for you.
I can't call you.
You have to call me. We are absolutely here to help you today. That's what we put this together for, you know. We wanted to raise public awareness of this issue and help you plan for this last phase of your life so that the control is yours, not somebody else's. And speaking of that last phase of the life, this is what we're going to end up with, okay? When all the wills and power of attorneys go away, what's left are your loved ones, okay? We have discovered, we have totally renovated the estate's office the last couple years. We've been working really hard over there at the courthouse. And in the back of this book is a checkoff sheet of those documents that we asked your loved one to bring at their first meeting with us to process an estate, okay? So if you want to do something for them, to help them, go over these documents and make sure you know where everything is or that you have it available and in a place that your loved ones will be able to access. Because this will make it a lot easier, and it may make it, it's as simple as, you know, where's the will? The funeral home. Has anyone made their funeral home arrangements? My mama has. She paid for hers and my brother's both already. And, I'm sorry,
I
what?
said I talk about it, but I haven't done it.
I know. I'm bringing it up because this is the last phase. And I, for one, I use my Aunt Natalie as a great example. My Aunt Natalie was a nurse, and she had 5 children. My Uncle Bob died. She lived alone for a very long time. He died fairly young. And my cousins were great. I mean, we always went there for vacations, and my cousins had families, and they looked after their mom. But eventually, she knew that she was slipping. My Aunt Natalie went out and toured and interviewed different facilities and picked the one to check herself into, okay? And sure enough, about a year after she did that, an assisted living facility, a year after she did that is when the full-blown Alzheimer's hit. And she lived another 4 years in that facility. And she made it easy on her family. And I am going to do the same thing for my daughters. I have 2 daughters. They don't live here, unfortunately. I keep trying to talk them back into it. But maybe I'll get lucky one day.
Come to the beach.
Come to the beach. Yeah, I'm the cool grandma at the beach. Maybe they'll come. But if they don't, I'm going to make this process easy for them. Because I went through it with my husband, and it wasn't easy. And that is part of the other part of the reason that I got started on this. Because I went through this personally. And having to help my husband write a will was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life, knowing that he had cancer. And we got through it, we're on the other side of it, and now I want to encourage everybody else to plan for the last phase of their life. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much for having us today.